welcome to In Depth. I'm sports editor Nick Talbot. I'm joined today by Greg Luca. We're going to talk a lot about the minor league sports all across San Antonio today. We got a lot of admissions news, we got a lot of XFL news to hit on, and we have SAFC having their best season of all time. Greg, let's start with the Missions. What's going on with their ballpark situation right now?
Yeah, it's a very interesting scenario to have all three minor league teams that we don't usually talk about all be in the spotlight at the same time. But the report this week is that the Missions are potentially being sold for $28 million to a group that would end up building a downtown stadium, which is something that, as long as I've been here since 2018, it's been in the talks and it's been talked about long before that. Wolf Stadium is one of the older venues in the league, and especially it became under the microscope when they tried to move to AAA. And what happened around 2020 was that MLB kind of reorganized how they want minor leagues to be structured. So a lot of the smaller teams got wiped out, and it got much more restructured into, I think, each professional organization has 4 minor league clubs, and it's very much regimented. And they, along with that, started to raise a lot of the standards. So for Wolf Stadium in particular, it started to come under the microscope of, do they have enough seating? But then more specifically in the immediate, it was maybe expanding the clubhouses. They need a female dressing room, and there was a couple other kind of odds and ends that they needed to start to fix up. So it becomes a question of, does it make sense to make these improvements at Wolf Stadium, and what is that going to cost? Or is it finally time to have this be the nudge that gives you the downtown ballpark that you probably wanted and needed anyway? So I'm sure there were a lot of different options kicked around during the past few years, and even longer than that. And it seems like if this is actually a path forward, that's something that's pretty promising for, all the people who support the Missions. Because it's always been about, could this be a AAA club? They tried that 1 or 2 years and it didn't bump the attendance very much. And then they went back down to AA because it's easier to meet the standards the lower you are on the totem pole. And then there's going to be people who want to say, could this, be a pathway to having an MLB team here, which that seems like a long shot, but that's just the kind of thing that, people are interested in. And certainly any kind of step in the positive direction is something that people will get excited about.
Yeah, people always want the second major league franchise here, whether it's baseball or the NFL. Probably not likely to happen. So this seems like it's a good deal, maybe even to get their feet back into the AAA game. But the stadium has been in disarray for a while. Maybe the disarray might be a strong word, but it's not obviously one of the stronger ballparks in the minor league system.
It's just to jump in, it's always been sort of under the microscope. And I think when they had AAA, those guys in particular, those players are shuffling up and down from MLB rosters. So they're seeing kind of the best that you have to offer in terms of, stadium amenities and things like that. And it was pretty jarring in a lot of ways, just that the clubhouse wasn't up to that level. And so there was, even heading into that season, a lot of things that they were doing with the batting cages, and part of it with the new guidelines as well as like a nutritional component and just things that are being offered, the experience for minor league baseball as well. So it all comes into having to provide a higher quality of life for those players. And so if you have a new ballpark that does that, and then for the public, I think it's important because a lot of people it's not very convenient to get out to Wolf Stadium.
I've made the drive several times, and it's not fun to get out there, and especially if you got traffic.
If you have it in a more centralized downtown area, maybe you just get some tourist traffic or some foot traffic or whatever it may be, or it's just easier for the general San Antonian to be able to come out to a game. So I think that there's a lot of reasons that move seems promising, and so if they can get it through, it's probably a win-win for everybody.
And they're looking at a few locations. Where are some of the locations they've kind of named? Some are realistic, some didn't seem so realistic.
Yeah, the big one that I think was thrown out in the story was the San Pedro Creek Culture Park, kind of that area. I know there's been some property discussions, purchases, things changing hands in that area related to Graham Weston and the group that he's involved in of investors. So we'll see if they settle there, if it ends up being somewhere else, but there's still a lot that has to be kind of finalized in that sense. A lot of what we're talking about right now is just based on reporting that our writers here have done, and less things that have been officially announced and formalized. So I think a lot of it remains up in the air.
Yeah, and the second thing we're going to is getting another franchise on top of everything. We got the XFL team coming here, the San Antonio Brahmas. Am I saying that right? Is it Brahmas or is it Brahmas?
It's the Brahmas, yeah.
Is it the Brahmas? I heard some people saying Brahmas yesterday.
Well, you need to talk to them. That's incorrect. But it's an interesting name choice. I don't know if it's what I would have gone with. It's kind of different. But there's a lot of different reasons probably that they went that route. They in their little announcement video, they mentioned the vast plains of San Antonio. So I don't know what they really think that it's like here, but
we have vast plains. There's lots of wind, just like West Texas, lots of windmills.
Maybe they're thinking on the outskirts a little bit more than in the city. But They think it kind of symbolizes Texas, and there's a lot of, The Rock had like his whole Brahma Bull gimmick, and he's the XFL co-owner guy. So, it makes sense that they might try to tie that in. And a lot of the names in the league are recycled. It's either the same locations and team names from the 2020 version of the league, or it's, like the Tampa Bay Vipers became the Las Vegas Vipers, and there was one other case like that, the Dallas Renegades or the Arlington Renegades. So there's a lot of things that didn't change very much, but the San Antonio name being a new market and an entirely new name that they put on it, this was the one I guess they decided to get adventurous on. And it's interesting that, the coach is Hines Ward, and they went with the black and yellow color scheme. So that's going to be something that, I'm sure that he'll like that, and maybe it'll get the people excited. It'll all be part of that culture, because I don't know to what extent they're going to be able to establish this sort of thing. But, he's mentioned that he sees San Antonio as kind of like a blue collar, sports loving city, similar to Pittsburgh in some ways from his experience. So I don't know how apt that comparison is, but that's sort of the vibe that they're going for with this team. And, it'll be really interesting to see with this league in general, how they connect with their local communities, because the teams are going to be based in Arlington most of the year, and then they're going to all travel for their games in their local markets. So what kind of connection will the San Antonio Brahmas have with the community here is going to be interesting. But, at least MacArthur goes by the Brahmas, so people are a little bit used to it. I didn't see a whole lot of backlash. I kind of thought there would be more people who were against it. But I think people are just willing to get on the hype train and be ready for a new team to come through and support them the same way they did the Commanders in the Alliance, which was, it was incredible to see the turnout that those guys got in their short time here.
Yeah, all those Stone Cold Steve Austin fans might not like the name Brahmas out there, but we've seen these franchises pop up before. Obviously, we just had the USFL. They're still playing. Obviously, they weren't here. They kind of did a similar scenario, though, where they were playing all their games out of Birmingham. The difference is these teams were actually playing in their cities, practicing in Arlington. Is that correct?
Yeah, so they're all, where the USFL, they played all of the games in Birmingham, like you said. At least in the XFL, they're going to be playing in their local markets. And I haven't kept up with the USFL. I think that was sort of a short-term plan. I don't know if they're getting back to their markets or if it's a different deal. But I believe that the XFL is going to be able to recruit a higher caliber of player and be kind of a higher level deal than the USFL was. I don't think that gained the same traction or got the same level of interest and infrastructure behind it as the XFL. But and the XFL, they have their draft planned in the next couple of weeks. I was told mid-November is kind of the timeline that they're kicking around. And they aim to kick off in mid-February. So, they really got to get rolling on some of this stuff. So, at this point, I think it's fair for anybody to have doubts about the long-term stability of any kind of spring football league. I just think we've seen too many of them come and go. And, the Alliance, it felt like, I always remember Daryl Johnson was the
Alliance of American Football now, right? With the San Antonio Commanders.
Yeah. Daryl Johnson was the GM of that team, and he said, if this league doesn't work, then none of these are ever going to work, because we have this infrastructure and we have all these people who are, football veterans and have been in front offices and understand how it works. And maybe it just came down to the money that they didn't have. And, certainly The Rock has enough liquidity to probably support a football league for a while. But generally speaking, I don't know that, from the organization being profitable by itself, that there's much of a proof of concept for that. But I guess we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, with the Alliance, that kind of ended after it got sold like mid-season. This other investor came in, saw the books, and then pretty much just shut it down,
Yeah,
right?
They were just so desperate because they had their initial investor who ended up in some legal entanglements and wasn't able to get a hold of the amount of money that he thought he was going to have to support the league. And so then they had made all these long-term plans of, we don't really have to start turning a profit until year 3 because we have this runway that we've been given based on the amount of money available. And then instantly that just wasn't there. So they were desperate when they went to Tom Dundon, who's the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes, to sort of bail out the league in that sense. But then that gave him a lot of control and ended up finding, hey, this thing's not working. And then it was over just like that. But, who knows if it would have survived the pandemic anyway. Like we saw that was the end of the XFL's initial iteration too. So they were going to run into challenges one way or the other down the line. And so, we'll see. It seemed like the XFL in 2020 was doing all right before all that hit. So maybe they have a model that works. But like I said, I'm just going to have my doubts until I'm proven wrong.
They do have a quarterback that's starting in the NFL right now.
Yeah, right.
Walker for the Carolina Panthers.
Some of these guys will end up using this as a springboard, and some of them will be guys that fans will recognize or have heard of. I keep thinking about, Hines Ward talks about wanting to have a San Antonio connection, whether it's guys who played at UTSA or maybe at UIW or who are from the city. And I keep thinking about Sincere McCormick from UTSA, who's out there somewhere. He came out a year early and went undrafted, and he was with the Raiders, and he got injured. And I don't know what the status is of his recovery or his tenure with the Raiders, but what a perfect guy that would be to to be able to put on an XFL roster and have them back in the Alamo Dome. So these are the things that they have to think about and who they can land that's going to bring them some name recognition and get people excited. But just from the amount of clicks that we got on the XFL team announcement story and some of the traction it got on social media, there's people who are interested in this, and I think they're willing to give it another shot and throw their weight behind another team.
Yeah, people in San Antonio and, of course, Texas love football. When the Alliance was here, the attendance for San Antonio was much better than the rest of the league. How does the XFL try to emulate that, and can they get that kind of market again? Because it was almost double for what everyone else was doing.
Yes, it was actually fully double the average of the rest of the league, and they were probably about to have their biggest attendance, of the year, because Johnny Manziel's team was coming in, and there was a lot of excitement around that, even though he probably wasn't even going to play in the game. But that's sort of beside the point. I think a lot of it was just the marketing effort and the way they got out in the community and some of the things that they probably paid for in terms of advertising. And it's an interesting conversation to get into, because there's a lot of those same questions swirling around UTSA right now and what they're doing to get fans in the Alamo Dome, or what they're not doing to get fans out in the Alamo Dome in ways that could be better. So it's always a question of how directly you're engaging the market and how much money you're willing to put into advertising and getting on people's radar, and then your ticket prices and the experience you offer, parking and concessions and all that. So everything factors in, and these are really complicated conversations. But I think the most important part is that people in San Antonio are willing to give it a shot if you give them something that they can get behind.
All right, going from a couple could-bes where we have the XFLs, it could be, downtown ballparks, it could be, we have the San Antonio FC, which is in the playoffs, second round, having their best season of all time.
I thought you were going to go for like a football thing. I was so ready for football. I was ready for that transition.
Football?
This worked, but I was ready for the football transition. Anyway, yes. San Antonio FC is playing in the Western Conference Finals this week. They're going to be up against Colorado Springs Switchbacks FC, who they've beaten twice this year already by 1-0 scores, and they're going to be a pretty big favorite. And San Antonio FC's had an incredible season. They tied the league records for wins with 24, road wins with 13, and shutouts with 17. And they did it despite shuffling through a ton of different lineup combinations and having a lot of guys injured through the year. It's been incredible to see the level of commitment that they've had to bringing in new guys and keeping this team performing at a high level. And I think this is really a fascinating team to watch. And if I was more of a soccer expert, I'd probably be more nerdy about it. But even from my standpoint, it's really cool the way that they play. Like, they rank last in the league in possession and just passes completed, because they play this up-tempo pressing style where they are just trying to get in the face of the opposing defenders and not let them make any easy passes out of the back. And if they get the ball in their own end, they send the ball upfield pretty quickly and then try to chase it down. And it's interesting because it's not necessarily a style that could work at the higher levels of soccer. Like, I think if you tried this in the English Premier League, the defenders at the back end are so comfortable with the ball at their feet that they're able to just play around that sort of pressure, and it doesn't have any impact. But when you get down to second-tier North American soccer, they found the style of play that's like, other teams hate to play against them. It's just not fun to have to deal with that pressure for 90 minutes plus. And so it's interesting to see how successful that's been. And it comes down to then finding players who fit that mentality, because you need to have guys who are willing to apply that pressure from start to finish and have the fitness level to hold up with that kind of environment. And Coach Alan Marcina is now in his third year and has been trying to build that through the time that he's been here. He's had a very clear vision that he's laid out for. They talked this year a lot about being mentality monsters, whatever goes wrong, resiliency, a lot of the typical sports stuff, but they lay it out in a way that's very direct and well communicated and that gets people to buy into it. Like, they have little placards in everybody's locker room with like, these are the values on the field, these are the values off the field, and this is like our identity. And if you're coming into the organization, you have to buy into that and believe in it and be a part of it. And they found enough guys who will do it. So that's put them in a position where they've just sort of mastered this way of playing, and it's put them in a position where they're probably the favorite to win the league. It's tough because the two teams that are left in the Eastern Conference, I think whoever wins that game would probably be a slight favorite against San Antonio if they were to match up. But it'll be San Antonio's home field advantage in the final will make a lot of a difference there too, just because they had the most points in the league through the regular season.
All right, thanks for joining us today, and thanks again for Greg Luca joining us and talking all the ways about the minor league sports here in San Antonio. Nick Talbot, and see you next time.